The envelope landed on the counter with a sound that felt heavier than paper should. Miriam Cleary didn't look up right away. She was still holding the zipper of her jacket closed with one hand. The pull had broken 2 winters ago, and she kept meaning to replace it. The same way she kept meaning to do a lot of things, and with the other hand she was sliding the envelope across the marble toward the young man behind the desk who had not yet acknowledged that she existed. He was typing something, or pretending to type something. Either way, his eyes stayed on his screen. "I have an appointment," Miriam said. 3 o'clock, one moment. The lobby of Hargrove Private Lending was the kind of place that made you feel like your shoes were wrong. Miriam's were. They were the good ones, the ones she kept in a box under her bed and took out for interviews and parent-teacher nights. But in here, against this floor, they made a sound like someone apologizing. She shifted her weight and stopped moving. Behind her, the glass doors were still settling from when she'd pushed through them. Outside, the November sky over downtown Ottawa was the color of old dishwater, and the wind had been the kind that didn't just chill you, it reminded you of every decision that had led you to be standing outside in it. "Cleary?" the young man said, finally looking at her. He had the expression of someone who had been told to be pleasant and had taken that to mean he should smile without his eyes. "That's me, down the hall. Miss Arsenault will see you." Miriam picked up her envelope. She walked the way she always walked now, careful, deliberate, like someone carrying something breakable, and went down the hall. She had prepared. That was the thing she wanted someone to understand, though there was no one to tell. She had prepared for 3 weeks. The business plan was 42 pages. She had had it printed at the copy shop on Rideau Street and paid for the spiral binding because she thought it would look more serious, and the young woman at the counter had said, "Nice cover," and Miriam had said, "Thank you, I made it myself." And there had been a pause, and she had realized the young woman was being polite, not sincere, but she'd taken the binders anyway. The business, a small catering operation. She'd been cooking for events unofficially for 6 years. Christenings, retirement parties, the occasional wedding where the family couldn't afford a full-service company. She was good. She knew she was good because people called her back, and people who called you back were telling you the truth about your food in a way that compliments at the table never did. She had a client list, references, a projection sheet, a proposed kitchen space on Carling Avenue that the landlord would hold for her until the end of January. She needed $42,000. Arsenault kept her waiting 11 minutes, which Miriam knew because she watched the second hand on the clock above the door. When the woman finally appeared, late 40s, good suit, the kind of posture that came from never having had to carry her own groceries, she did not apologize for being late. Cleary. A handshake. Firm, brief, professionally meaningless. "Come in." The office had a plant in the corner that looked like it had been chosen by committee. There was a framed print on the wall that said something about vision. Miss Arsenault sat behind her desk and opened a folder, and Miriam recognized her own business plan inside it, the spiral binding she had paid extra for, and something about seeing it there, handled, reduced to a folder, made her breathe through her nose. "So," Ms. Arsenault said, 42,000, yes. The breakdown is on page, I've reviewed it." She hadn't looked up yet. "How long have you been operating?" 6 years. "Informally, I have references from informally, so no registered business income. I've reported my earnings. I have my T4s. As a sole proprietor without a business number until," she checked something, 8 months ago. "I registered when I knew I was ready to formalize. That's the point of this loan, to make the transition." Mrs. Arsenault looked at her then, for the first time fully. She had a very particular kind of look, one that wasn't unkind exactly, but was performing a kind of assessment that had already reached its conclusion. It was the look of someone deciding how much time this would take. "Miss Cleary, I have to be honest with you. Your credit history is thin. You have a gap between 2019 and 2021 that I had a child, and then I had a difficult 2 years. I'm aware of the gap, and you're a single parent? My daughter is 4. She's not, that isn't relevant to the business plan. It speaks to capacity." The word landed differently than Arsenault probably intended, or maybe exactly as she intended. Miriam looked at the plant in the corner. She thought about what she wanted to say and what was useful to say and how those two things were rarely the same thing, and she said, "I have a letter of intent from the landlord on page 31. I have testimonials from 14 clients on pages 12 through 20. My projected revenue in year 1 is conservative. I didn't inflate it because I didn't want to insult your time." There was a pause. "The committee reviews applications on a monthly basis," Ms. Arsenault said. "I'll submit yours. But I want to be candid. With your current profile, I'd expect a partial offer at best, and the rate would reflect the risk. How partial? Perhaps half, perhaps less. Half would not cover the kitchen deposit and the equipment and the insurance and the permits. Half was the shape of a door closing. I see, Miriam said. She picked up her bag. The strap was fraying at the buckle, which she hadn't noticed until now, standing in this office where things did not fray. She thanked Miss Arsenault, which cost her something, and she walked back down the hall, past the young man who was again looking at his screen, through the glass doors and into the cold. She got as far as the bottom of the steps. That was where she stopped, because her wallet had been in the outside pocket of her bag. She'd put it there so she could pay for parking without digging. And when she reached for it now, the pocket was open. The snap that was supposed to hold it shut had given at some point, the way things gave when you'd been meaning to deal with them, and the wallet was gone. She turned around, went back through the glass doors. The young man looked up with fresh irritation. I think I dropped my wallet, she said, in the hallway, or possibly in Miss Arsenault's office. I'll call up. He called. He waited. He murmured something she couldn't hear. Then he said, someone will bring it down. She stood by the desk and waited and did not look at her shoes. The elevator opened. The man who walked out was not someone from Miss Arsenault's office. He was not, in fact, someone who looked like he worked in any office, which was strange because the building he was walking through was very clearly for people who worked in offices. He was wearing a jacket rather than a suit. Charcoal, good quality, the kind of quality that didn't announce itself. And he was carrying her wallet in one hand and a phone in the other, and he was still talking into the phone when he stopped in front of her. Hold on, he said into it. He looked at her. Miriam Cleary? Yes. He handed her the wallet and went back to his phone and walked away. She stood there. She looked down at the wallet. It had been in her hands for perhaps 3 seconds when something fell out of it. A photograph, the one she kept behind her transit card, the one from her daughter Piper's 2nd birthday, the one where Piper had frosting on her nose and was laughing at something off camera. The photograph hit the marble floor and slid. The man had taken 2 steps toward the elevator. He stopped, not because he'd heard it fall. The photo made no sound, but he stopped as if some other sense had caught something, and he turned and he looked at the photograph on the floor. Miriam was already crouching to pick it up. When she straightened, he was still looking at her, not at the photo now, at her. What did you say your name was? He said. His phone was at his side. He'd forgotten it entirely. Cleary, she said. Miriam Cleary. Something moved across his face that she couldn't name. It wasn't recognition exactly. It was more like the moment before recognition, when the brain has already understood something that the rest of you hasn't caught up to. Your daughter, he said, in that photo. What's her name? Miriam held the photograph a little tighter. Why? I'm sorry. He seemed to return to himself slightly. He put the phone in his jacket pocket. I apologize. I don't have a good way to explain that question. Then don't. She put the photo back in her wallet. She put the wallet in the inside pocket of her bag this time, the one with the proper zipper, and she turned to leave. My name is Elliot Hargrove, he said behind her. She turned back. Hargrove, as in the building she was standing in. As in the nameplate she'd walked past in the lobby without reading because she'd been watching the floor. I own this building, he said, and the company. I just came from a board meeting on the 4th floor, and I was about to leave and I found your wallet on the floor of the hallway. She didn't say anything. I'm asking about your daughter, he said, because I need to ask you something, and I understand that it's going to sound strange, and I'm asking you to bear with me for 5 minutes. I have parking to pay for. I'll validate your parking. That's not the point. I know. He looked at her steadily. He had the kind of face that had probably learned over time to be still when it needed to. 5 minutes, and then if you want to leave, you leave, and I'll have someone process your loan application tonight instead of next month. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, 4 minutes. They sat in a small meeting room off the lobby, the kind that existed for exactly these unanticipated conversations. A glass of water appeared, left by someone Miriam didn't see come in. Elliot Hargrove sat across from her and put his hands flat on the table in a way that she recognized after a moment as the gesture of someone about to say something they have been carrying for a long time. I had a daughter, he said. She'd be 4 now. She died when she was 3 days old. Miriam said nothing. Her name was going to be Piper. The room was very quiet. Outside, through the glass wall, she could see the lobby, the young man at his desk, the plant by the elevator that no one had watered in what looked like several weeks. My wife and I were not together anymore. We hadn't been, really, since before Piper was born. We named her before we knew she wasn't going to. We named her the week before she arrived, when everything still seemed like it was going to be fine. He was looking at the table. I don't talk about this, then why are you telling me? Because your daughter has the same name, and the same, he stopped. Started again. In your photograph, she has the same. There's a look she has. The way she's laughing, it's not rational. I know it's not rational. No, Miriam said. It isn't, I know. He looked up. I'm sorry, I told you I didn't have a good way to explain it. She looked at him across the table. He was, she thought, a man who had learned to be competent as a way of managing the other things. She recognized that. She had learned something similar. Her father, she said finally. He's not, he left before she was born. He didn't want to be part of it. So it's just us. How old are you? 29, is that relevant? No. I don't know why, I asked. You're wondering how someone manages it alone at 29. I'm wondering how anyone manages it alone at any age. She looked at her water glass. You learn what you actually need and you let the rest go, she said. The hardest part is figuring out which is which. Elliot Hargrove was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Tell me about your business, she told him. Not from the beginning, not the way she'd prepared to tell Ms. Arsenault, with the bullet points and the page references. She told him the way she'd told her friend Denise over the phone at 11 at night after Piper was asleep, the real version, the one with the doubt inside it and the wanting inside it, and the specific image she kept returning to, which was a kitchen that was hers, just hers, where she could move around without apologizing for being there. He listened. He didn't look at his phone. He asked one question, about the kitchen space on Carling, and when she said the landlord was holding it until the end of January, he nodded once, as if confirming something. Your application is going to be approved, he said when she finished. Full amount. Standard rate, not the risk rate. She looked at him. You can't just decide that. I own the company. There are processes. I can make processes move. He said it without arrogance, as a statement of fact, and she believed him. I'm not doing this because of Piper's name. I want to be clear about that. I'm doing it because your business plan is solid and Ms. Arsenault's assessment was conservative to the point of being wrong. How do you know? You haven't read it. I will tonight. She should have felt something uncomplicated. Relief, maybe. Gratitude. But she felt something more complicated, because she was 29 and she had spent enough time asking for things to know the difference between someone doing something because they could and someone doing something because they chose to. I don't want a favor, she said. It isn't one. You qualified. She just didn't look far enough. A silence. Why didn't she look far enough? He seemed to consider this with more seriousness than she expected. Because the profile looks thin on paper if you're only reading the page, he said. And some people only read the page. She left with her parking validated and a business card with a direct number on it, and the understanding that someone would call her within 48 hours. She drove home in her 7-year-old Civic with the heat turned up and the radio off, and she didn't call Denise, not yet. She just drove. Piper was at her neighbor Elspeth's, retired, 2 cats, inexplicably good at finger painting, and Miriam picked her up at 5:30 and carried her home on her hip, even though Piper was 4 and too big for this now, but sometimes 4-year-olds let you carry them and you should do it while you can. Did you get the money? Piper asked. You're 4. How do you know about money? You talk about it when you think I'm sleeping. Miriam kissed the top of her head. Maybe, she said, I think maybe. The call came in 36 hours, not 48. The woman on the phone was efficient and professional, and said that Miriam's application had been reviewed and approved at the full requested amount, and would she like to schedule a time to come in and sign the documentation. Miriam said yes, she would like that, and when she hung up she sat on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet, and let herself cry for approximately 4 minutes, which was the amount of time available to her before Piper woke up from her nap. Then she got up and washed her face and started making soup. The kitchen on Carling Avenue had a window that faced west, and in the late afternoon the light came in at the angle Miriam had stood there imagining, the first time she'd walked through it with the landlord, the angle that turned ordinary things gold. She took possession in February, 3 weeks after signing the papers. The first event she catered from the new space was a retirement party in Nepean, 47 people, a woman named Greta who'd spent 30 years as a school librarian and wanted lamb and roasted root vegetables and a dessert table. Miriam made individual pavlovas because she'd always found the drama of a single large pavlova slightly anxious making, too much riding on one meringue, and the individual ones let you make more, let you give people seconds, let you be generous. At the end of the night, Greta found her in the kitchen and took both her hands and said, "Everyone asked who did the food," and then she didn't say anything else because she didn't need to. Miriam drove home past the Hargrove building on her way back to pick up Piper. She didn't plan to. It was not on the way. She took the long route anyway. She ran into Elliot Hargrove 6 weeks later at the farmer's market on George Street, which would have seemed improbable if Ottawa were a larger city. He was buying honey. Piper was holding a paper bag of apple cider donuts and eating one and looking at him with the frank, unhurried assessment that 4-year-olds applied to strangers. "You're the man from the building," Piper said. "I am," he said. "You're Piper. How do you know my name?" He looked at Miriam. She didn't help him. "Your mum mentioned it," he said. Piper considered this, then she held out the bag. "Do you want a donut?" He took one. He ate it with more seriousness than donuts usually warranted, and Piper watched him with the patience of someone conducting a test, and when he finished, she seemed to reach a conclusion, because she put her hand in Miriam's hand and went back to eating her own. Miriam looked at him over her daughter's head. "The business is going well," she said. "In case you were wondering, I wasn't. I read your plan. I knew it would. That's very confident of you. I've read a lot of business plans." A woman with a stroller squeezed past. The market shifted around them, November cold, loud with the particular energy of people who had decided to be somewhere enjoyable. "Do you do this market every week?" he asked. "Most weeks. You?" "First time. I usually order everything delivered." He looked slightly uncomfortable saying it, as if the habit had become, in this context, unexpectedly visible. "Why'd you come today?" "I needed honey," he said. "And I've been meaning to come for 3 years." She looked at him for a moment. He was holding his jar of honey and looking back at her, and there was something in his face that she recognized. The same thing she'd seen across the meeting room table, the same thing she saw sometimes in her own mirror. The look of someone who had put a particular kind of grief somewhere manageable, and was still sometimes surprised by where it had ended up. "There's a coffee place on the corner," she said, "if you want." Piper needs something warm before her hands fall off. "My hands are not falling off," Piper said. "Your hands are going to fall off. They're not." "Okay," Miriam said. "We'll see." She started walking toward the coffee place. After a moment, she heard footsteps behind her, unhurried, keeping pace. 3 months was a long time, and also not very long at all, depending on what you were measuring. Long enough to learn how someone took their coffee. Long enough to know that he had a habit of reading the last page of a book first, which Miriam found baffling, and which he defended on the grounds that knowing the ending let him pay attention to everything else. Long enough for Piper to begin correcting his pronunciation of certain words. He said "been" in a way that suggested he'd spent time in the United States, and Piper found this suspicious, and for him to receive this correction with the same seriousness he'd given the donut. It was not long enough to be certain of anything. Miriam was, in general, suspicious of certainty. It had cost her things before. What she was certain of? Her kitchen on Carling, the way the afternoon light moved across the counter, the sound of Piper talking to herself while she colored, the particular satisfaction of a table full of people eating something she'd made and not knowing who had made it. These were things she had built, and she had built them carefully, and she wasn't prepared to be careless with them. What she was less certain of, what it meant that she looked forward to Wednesday evenings, when Elliot came for dinner after a standing commitment nearby, and stayed to help with dishes, which he did badly, and told Piper a story, which he did well, and which she had stopped pretending to herself was just a convenient arrangement. He told her on an evening in late April, when Piper was asleep and the kitchen was clean and there was nothing left to do except be where they were. He said, "I don't know how to do this without being careful about it." She said, "What does that mean?" he said. "It means I'm aware of what you have built and I don't want to be something that unsettles it. But I also can't keep pretending I'm here for the pasta." She looked at the table. Outside, the window showed the first real dark of spring, the kind that smelled like earth coming back. "The pasta is very good," she said. "It is," he said. "That isn't the point." She knew it wasn't the point. She had known for some time. "Piper likes you," she said, which was not an answer and was entirely an answer. He waited. He was, she had come to understand, a man who knew how to wait. "So do I," she said. "I just need it to be. Slow is fine, and I need you to understand that she comes first. Always. I know she does, and that if it doesn't work, it can't be." She stopped. "It can't be a thing that costs me what I've built." He looked at her steadily. "I would never want it to." She believed him. That was the thing. She had learned, the hard way, to know the difference between what people said and what they meant, and she believed him. Outside, something was beginning that didn't have a name yet. The way the best things often don't when they start, the way spring doesn't announce itself but just arrives. One morning, in the smell of the air and the light through the window and the ordinary sound of someone else in the kitchen, making coffee while the person you love most in the world is still asleep down the hall. Miriam picked up her mug. "Slow," she said again. "Slow," Elliot agreed, and the night outside the window was very quiet, and it was enough.